It's been a couple years since the last shop tour and a lot has changed. And speaking of change, Ashley and I just got married. We're about to go on our honeymoon, and as a result, the house build is temporarily on hold and I cleaned my shop. The shop is rarely this clean, so let me take you on a tour and show you what's new. So I figured for this tour, I'm gonna start at this corner and just work my way all the way around. We're gonna start here, which is some of my lumber storage. I have this kind of around this area because that's where I process my lumber over here, which we'll get to those work tables in a minute. There's a lot going on in this one workspace. I have books on woodworking, I have storage for various hand tools, and I also have some hardware. Let's start with the drill press because that's the main operation that happens here. I feel like this size drill press is great because you have a lot of range, but you can also store stuff underneath. Plenty of power for what I need it for. It's got a light and turns on and off, belt driven, so you can adjust the speeds as you want to. Stored around it are all of the accessories that I need for the drill press. Obviously, I've got a drilling plate, which when I'm not using, I'll store up above, set it down here, and then I have these armor clamps, which I like because they open up and tighten automatically like that. So these are just handy to have as I'm doing different drilling jigs. I have a few drilling jigs littered around the shop that I can use. I also have these vices. I have two different sizes. They're good for holding small parts if you want to drill out like through a dowel or something like that. I just find these at antique malls all the time. Along this back wall, you can see all of my favorite furniture making books that I can reference as I want to. And then surrounding the drill press are easy access to various drill bits that I really like using. So on this side, it's more of countersinks, and I've got a couple of metal bits. On the other side are all my woodworking bits, which include Forstner bits and Brad point bits. As soon as I'm done with an operation, I instantly put it back in this rack. So they never go anywhere other than right here. You can see the 11/32 bit is currently in the drill press. So on this side of the drill press, we have a whole bunch of hand tools, which include a bunch of hand planes and some odds and ends. Basically the prettiest tools that I own, the ones that I want to show off and just look at. I use this as a backdrop for most of my intros. And if you watch the video where I built this, you'll know that I kind of did that intentionally. I just wanted, you know, a showy spot for my nicest tools. So up here, I've got a bunch of hand planes. This is a larger 4.5 by Veritas. This is a spoke shave. We've got, this was sent out by a fan. He made me a pattern plywood Swiss Army knife with the pattern inlaid into the packaging, and the packaging was so nice that I just leave it inside there. It covers up an outlet on the back side, so if I ever need that, it's there, but for the most part, I just like covering it up. And of course, my chisels, which I think we're coming out with a set of plans for this chisel rack soon. I've had a lot of people ask me about it, and I built that years ago, pre-YouTube. I also have my favorite hand tools made by Tony Relu of Hillview Wood and Metal. It's got Elmwood inlay, which is my last name. Alm translates to elm in Swedish, and it's got my little logo up top right here. I also have one of his bullet levels with my logo in it and his, and of course the bi-square, which I use all the time. So below the hand tools, I have a whole bunch of practical drawers and stuff. This is a drawer that I can just take out and bring with me. It contains all of my sandpaper. I like to use a block sander, especially when it comes to breaking edges and things like that. And then next to those are more drill press accessories. On this side, I've got sanding bits and some countersink bits as well. And on the other side, I have punches and various things. Below that, I've got a bunch of tape, like label tape underneath. And then underneath that, I have pattern plywood samples. I like to have these around. When people ask me what I do, I usually show them pattern plywood. And it's nice when I have people over to the shop to show them all the different patterns that we've designed over the years. I think we're up to like 20 or 25 different patterns at this point, and I have, I think, all of them in here in some form. In front, you might be curious what this little drawer is, or I basically had a bunch of dead space when I designed the miter station. Some of you may have seen that video, and this is just for odds and ends accessories. The other air compressor is in the house right now, so the air hose usually lives in here, which fills it up, but I've also got respirators and odds and ends in there. Below that, speaking of nail guns and nailing accessories, that's what I have down here. I have all of my different nail guns. This one's the 23 gauge nailer. This is the stapler. I've got my 18 gauge nailer, and then I have all the nails that go with it right next to it. I should say that most of the shop has plans for it. If you are interested in building any of the things that I'm about to mention, there's a good chance that there's a set of plans on my website. This miter station is included in that. So here's these nails right here. So I have on this side all the 18 gauge, and then on this side all the others, because 18 gauge is what I normally use. So below that, you can see the air compressor lives underneath here, and this is a California Air Tools air compressor. It's super quiet, which I like, especially because I film in here. When it turns on, the best thing that I can relate it to is like turning on a mini fridge. That's how quiet it is. So you see this red hose connects to the air compressor, which goes into this hose reel, and I have way more hose than I could possibly need. Let's see you smirking back there. All right, moving on the miter station, we have my bank of all the hardware that I could ever possibly need. It's pretty much been labeled the same for a long time. Not much has changed with this. I think I added a new cabinet hardware drawer, and other than that, it's pretty much the same. I keep my socket set next to this. This is the Milwaukee socket set, which I love. If you're looking for a really nice organized socket set that you can actually keep organized, these are amazing. I have the smaller version, which I think is 1/4 inch. Is that what it is? I'll put it up on screen. And then the larger version, which is 3/8. You can see. I like this set because everything has a location. It's well labeled. I never really lose any parts for this, and it always lives inside of the case. So I've been looking for years for a good option for sockets, and I saw this. Adam Savage did a thing on it, and I was like, I need both of those like right away. So when it comes to wood storage, I have the rack that's up above me here, and I've had a lot of people asking about this rack. I made sure and finished the plans finally for it. So if you're interested in building a wood storage rack like this, it's basically just made out of scrap wood, and it's modular. So you can make however many columns and brackets you need. I designed this one when I had a bunch of 12-foot boards of walnut, and I've never really needed much more than that in this space. You know, I've got the storage over here, which is anything that's under like 36 inches lives in here. Everything else goes up there, and it's good to keep your wood stored flat because it'll stay straight longer. If you store boards upright, they can eventually start to warp or absorb moisture from the flooring. There's all sorts of things that can happen. This keeps them dry, out of the way, and keeps them flat. Now we're kind of at the miter station. We've been at it for a little while. We were kind of at the outfeed sides of it, but now this is the heart of the miter station. I did a whole video on making this miter station, and it was mostly with the upgrade of the new Kapex, which I love. I needed to rebuild this whole thing, so I just decided to do it right. There's a whole bunch of storage inside of here. I have full range of motion with the Kapex here, all of its different positions that it can go in. I also have a stop block that I can run along this T-track. This is the Rockler T-track. One of the things that I would have changed doing this miter station is I would have inset this little metal strip. It's just a peel and stick measuring tape, but I do find that it gets caught a little bit when I'm trying to put something up against the fence. So it would have been nice to just route a little groove on there. Other than that, I think it's amazing because here, I'll show you. So just slide this in right here, and then I can measure out. I mean, sometimes like it's great for repeated cuts. So if I wanted to make a bunch of 36-inch cuts, I lock it right there, slide it in. But I have started using it just to measure the piece to begin with. Sometimes even if I'm making one cut and I need it to be 36 inches, I trust this ruler enough that I'll just pop this thing on there and measure that way. Below this wing of the miter station is a whole bunch of storage. This is something that I really needed. I never had drawers on this side, and now I have full extension. I think they're 22-inch deep drawers. And I found these bins on Amazon. I'll post a link to them. They clip together. They just sort of coincidentally fit perfectly in this space, but they have little clips on the sides of them. Let's see if I can get one out. You can see this little clipped edge. That links to the edge of the next bin. So they don't really shift around very much, even if they're not fully locked in. So the top drawer is obviously stuff that I use the most. It's things like wood filler, because I'm not as good of a woodworker as I claim to be. And I've got a whole bunch of other odds and ends like rubber bands. If you've seen me make pattern plywood, I use a lot of rubber bands. And then these are all the accessories for my workbench. These probably could use a home closer to the workbench, but for now they live in here. Other odds and ends like earplugs and finished screws and straws. The next drawer down, I've got my Talenti containers. You guys know that I love the Talenti containers for storing all sorts of bits and bobs. I've got a whole bunch of lids over here, and over here I've got, these are for painting so that I can support something, painting or finishing. Usually I use these if I'm using like polyurethane, I'll put them underneath a piece. More drawers, there's lots of odds and ends. This one's not quite as clean as the last one, but I've got a lot of my sharpening equipment in here. I've got dominoes and odds and ends bins down here. Below that, we have all of my miscellaneous hardware. So if I need wheels or springs or hinges, they just live in here. It's amazing how many times this has saved me to find a piece of hardware that I don't need to go to a big box store to buy. And then below that, I've got lumber storage for small bits of lumber that I want to hold on to. This is usually like more of the exotic lumbers, things that I'd use for wood carving or you know, little boxes, or there's a bit of inlay in here. There's even some ebony over there. So now we're at the miter saw, which I mentioned before is the Festool Capex. I had a lot of people asking me how much I like it. I like it a lot. It has a lot more range than my old chop saw, which, if you remember, it didn't have this function at all. It just went straight down. And it's just been really nice to have a dedicated miter station that's actually built for the saw. I've got drawers on both sides. These come out here and store some odds and ends. I've got wrenches over here, and I've got Allen wrenches on this side. Below that, I have pens and pencils and marking devices and a few measuring devices as well. For a while, I was anti-drawers in my shop, but since I found these organizers, I love them, and they do stay this organized. Underneath is vacuum. It's plugged in, and that turns on when I turn on the saw. I also keep a garbage can in here, so the small bits of scrap end up in there, and then I empty that every once in a while. I thought about actually cutting this door down to like half height so I can slip the bits in as I cut, but then it would get more dusty inside there, so I think it's kind of a catch-22. So far, I've just left it as is and gotten really used to it. So to the right of the miter saw, you guys might know, this is a new addition to the shop that I'm really excited about. It is the mini lathe. So I built this miter station partly because I got a new saw, but also partly because I had a lathe and I didn't know where to put it. This has been amazing. I've had a lot of people ask me, like, does it want to fall forward while you're working with it? And it really doesn't. It stayed, I've used it several times. It stays nice and tight in its fitting right here. And I also have a little lock bolt that goes on this side. I love having a lathe in the shop, but I've always resisted putting one in the shop because they tend to take up a lot of room. This one doesn't really take up any room at all. So this is the Rockler Excelsior mini lathe, and my experience with it has been great. I'm new to the lathe, and so far my first couple turnings have turned out great. This was the first thing that I ever turned, which is this mallet. I use it all the time, and I'm excited to use it a whole lot more. You know, its capacity isn't gonna be that of a big lathe, but in this shop, I'm gonna be making a whole bunch of handles. I'll be making some Christmas ornaments for family for Christmas, and it's just nice to have access to this and to be able to easily put it away. As you can see, everything lines up on top when it's put away, and I've got storage back here. I know everyone keeps telling me that I need to finish the tool wall video, and I know that. I actually started it by building this rack for all of my chisels and gouges for the lathe. Now moving to the right of this, we can see this is all of my hand tools, all of my powered tools. I don't know what you would call it, but it's a lot of the things that I just need to grab. I'm like, I need a pair of pliers. It's right here. I've got all of my drills, all my tape measures. I've got screwdrivers up here, as well as some other odds and ends, scissors, squares. I added this on when I redid the miter station, just a little magnetic catch for all the odds and ends drill accessories. There's loads of stuff in here. I do kind of want to redesign this. This was based on Adam Savage's design from a video that he put out years ago. And it actually is designed to turn around, and there's a whole bunch of storage space on the back side of it, which I never used. And I like to build it again so it's just a little bit more efficient, but it has been great. And maybe in January I'll rebuild this as well. Got drill battery charging over here. I've just started adding a whole bunch of battery powered Festool to the shop. And I really like their chargers because they actually give you screw holes. So you can actually screw them into the wall, as opposed to other companies where you have to like slot in a screw behind it and it has a little keyhole. These just, you screw right through the front of it. In front of the battery charging, I have my dust collection system, and I get the most questions about this. This is the Clearview Cyclones. I think it's the CS 1800 something. It's been a while. CV 1800. They don't make this model anymore. I think they have an updated model, but this has been great. It collects a whole lot of dust into this drum. It's a 2-stage dust collection system, so a majority of it lands in this drum before it ever touches a filter, which means the filters last a lot longer. You can see there's a cyclone up here. The air enters through the cyclone, rotates around, and through centrifugal force, it drops the heavy material down into the drum. And in the center, there's a tube that goes up and into the filters. So really only the fine dust makes it all the way to the filter. So I can actually clean these out as I need to. There's a little clean out hole right over here, and you can see it's starting to collect at the bottom there. So we're getting over to an area that I haven't even covered on the channel. I did make a big decision last year to get rid of my carving station. So this used to be where I had my old carving workbench, which I have not used in years. I really built the new workbench, which we'll cover in a minute, to replace that. So since I replaced it, I just grabbed one of these rolling tool carts. Right now, all my carving supplies are in here. Eventually, I want to build like a easy access case for my carving tools, because this just isn't working. I want to get into more carving in the new year. That is one of my goals. So this will get organized. It's currently not that organized, but I'm excited to have it. It also is a new home for my sanding operations. Those used to be on the other corner of this wall, and this just makes a lot more sense because it's closer to the dust extraction. Still need to plumb some things. I may swap out this old belt sander that I think I'm gonna get a wide belt sander at some point, but this works pretty well. This Rigid is a tool that just about everybody that I know has in their shop. This is one of the earliest tools that I ever bought for my shop, and it's been incredibly handy. I think it's about to die. It's making really bad sounds, but it's been incredibly useful. So I find myself going to this a lot. I used to have it hidden behind the thickness planer, which was really annoying. So it's nice to have it really easy to access and fully plumbed into the dust extraction. Above this workstation, I have all my sustainer storage. I just recently built this. I didn't cover it on the channel. I just built it really quickly, and it's nice to have. These are just shelf pins, so I can adjust it accordingly. I thought about doing the drawer pull-out version of the Festool, but because it's so high up, I couldn't flip these open and actually use them. So it just made sense that as I need it, I'll come here, grab them, open them up, grab whatever accessory I want, and then put them back. I mismeasured when I made this, which is why I have these little slots below. I didn't realize that the new sustainers have these little tabs on their feet that are taller than the old sustainers. And when I designed this in SketchUp, I designed it off of the old sustainer. So I kind of messed it up. It would have been nice. My hope was to get 4 sustainers in here, and obviously I was only able to get 3 tall, but it's totally fine. I don't think I would have been able to reach the higher ones anyway. I've got a little bit of a display case in here right now. I didn't know what to do with this, and I've got the bowl that I turned. This was in another video, and I'm just using it to store some of the odds and ends. These are some brushes that I made. I took a class from my friend Aspen Golan on hand carving, and she makes these beautiful brushes, and these are ones that I made using her, from her instructions, and they're super fun. I'd like to cover how these are made on the channel at some point. I still have one. This one's unfinished. Aspen does these cool designs with black veneer. This is black veneer and cherry, and I should probably finish this. It's been sitting since last October, so it's almost a year old. This is one of the scraps from making the bowl. You can kind of see how it was made. I made just a giant block of this and chucked it up on the lathe and turned it. I really want to experiment with this more. This technique of making a bigger block of pattern plywood has a lot of options, and I haven't fully explored it, which is why this is sitting up here as a reminder for me to make some more. So we're on a new wall now, and this is my old bandsaw. Many of you may know that I almost got rid of this, but then I did some shop reorganizing and found a home for it. I know a lot of people are asking why I want 2 bandsaws in my shop, and this is just so much better than the big new Harvey, which is in that corner, at doing like small work. This will take smaller blades and just do more delicate work. But this saw is not very good at resawing. So like I talked about with the bowl, you'll know that I resawed these pieces. And the only reason that I could do that was because I upgraded to a larger saw, which I'll show you in a minute. Behind the bandsaw, you'll see this giant piece of burl. I had 2 different insulation companies competing to vacuum out the attic of the house. And one of them, the guy is a hobbyist miller. So he mills lumber as a hobby. And he said he had a whole bunch of maple burl. So this is a beautiful burl that at some point I will actually mill and polish up, but it fit beautifully between these 2 cabinets, so I decided to just hang it on the wall, mostly to get it out of the way, but I also think it looks really cool, and it's a nice backdrop to the bandsaw. If you've got ideas in the comments, let me know what you would make out of this, because I may just leave it as a wall hanging, but I also might build something out of it too. If you guys have seen my pattern plywood tambour bench, I built this to test a bunch of the techniques for building that project. So I have some kerf bending up above, and this is my first time making tambour, so I wanted to make sure that it would work first before I took a commission and made a tambour cabinet that's a lot fancier and invested a whole bunch of time and money into. I do that a lot in this shop, where I'll just experiment with some of the details, like adding pattern plywood drawers to things, or like how I build some of the cabinets. Like the miter station was sort of a test for me for building the kitchen cabinets. Some of the design ideas I had, I implemented there, and then I can take that in the next project that I work on, the kitchen cabinets, I can decide what I liked and what I didn't like. So as you can see, this is the big Harvey bandsaw. This is the one that replaced the jet bandsaw. This has changed my workflow in the shop so much. It's just a lot more power, and it's a lot stiffer because it's so much larger. It can take a larger blade, which means that you can take a deeper blade, which means that it could cut larger chunks of wood. This thing is incredibly powerful. It has a great fence on it, which also helps with the resawing. And the capacity, I'll have to look this up. I think it's 14 inches from here to here, which the old saw could barely do 6. So that is a big upgrade. I have it on a rolling base so I can move it around the shop. Most of my tools are on rolling bases, and it's for that reason that sometimes I need to cut something that's deeper than the space that I have behind it. So this will roll out as I need it. And then also, like, my shop's not very big, so sometimes I need the space if I'm doing big rips of panels off the table saw, so I can move this around. We didn't talk about this. This is the Rockler ProLift router table. I've had this for a really long time. It's one of my earlier videos on the channel, and I did build out all the drawers and stuff down below. The middle section is just for dust collection, so this closes up with a magnet, and there's a vacuum hose in the back to keep it nice and dust free. And then along the sides, I have all of my router bits and accessories. I group these. These are the ones that have the bearings on them, and then the next drawer down are the straight bits without any bearings. And then on this side, we have the larger bits. So these are, more like molding bits and stuff. Below that, we have all the accessories to raise and lower and swap out your bits, which with this ProLift, it makes it really easy to quickly swap things out. And then below that is just a bunch more drawers with storage, things like safety gear and odds and ends accessories that you need for any router table. So moving around this corner, I've got in the back here, this is one of the big changes. So you'll notice that the layout has changed quite a bit with the new bandsaw, and I pushed a whole bunch of the tools that I don't use that often back in this back corner. So I have my sharpening station and I have my drum sander here. So both of these can roll out really easily as I need to, but when I don't need them, they're not taking up floor space, which is really important in a smaller shop. Back here, I have a lot of odds and ends stored. I have a lamp that goes here, which is currently in the house, and then we've got a couple of sawhorses. We've got C-stands for filming, and then across this back wall is all of my clamp storage. Again, I have plans for these clamp racks, and they've been great. I mean, I can grab this stuff really quick, and they're kind of universal. You can put almost any style clamp on this, and you can grow it to whatever size shop you have. Along the back wall, I've got all of my Shaper gear. This is the handheld CNC, the Shaper Origin. CNCs can take over your entire shop if you want them to. I don't use CNC that often, so this is kind of a perfect solution for my shop. So this is the Woodmaster. I've had it in my shop for a while now. I bought it off of a friend. It's probably more of a tool than I need. I use it just as a thickness planer, but you can use it as a shaper. You can use it to mill lumber, and it's kind of designed as a multi-tool. I tried to use it as a drum sander. It didn't work very well as a drum sander, so I pretty much just use it as a thickness planer, but it is a monster of a thickness planer. So on the other side of the Woodmaster is my table saw, which is obviously one of the most important tools in the shop. Part of the reason for rearranging things is just so that my workflow works a little bit better with the table saw. The Harvey kept getting in the way, and this is a lot easier to roll out of the way. So I'm finding this setup works a lot better. This is the SawStop 35-inch 3-horsepower saw, and it's been amazing. It's worked great, and obviously SawStop is packed with safety features, which is really nice. I added this outfeed table, which I like a shorter outfeed table. Some people build them into bigger tables, but I find that I just like this length because I can kind of tip up the workpiece as it kind of comes off this back edge. But if I do need a bigger outfeed table, I can always roll my workbench over here, which is at the same height. On the other side of the table saw is the table saw storage cabinet. I have plans for both the outfeed and the storage cabinet, and this just keeps all of the odds and ends accessories. It could probably be organized a little bit better, but I have all my push sticks, and I have the SawStop brake cartridges. I keep feather boards and the wrenches and new throat plates and all the odds and ends that you need. These are Rockler setup bars, brass setup bars, which I use all the time to make sure everything's nice and fine-tuned. The next drawer down, I think, is just full of random camera accessories that I never use, so I don't really...
I gave him that dolly.
Yeah,
like 10 years ago.
Eric gave me this, and I've used it once, so you want it back?
No.
And then below that is the different table saw blades, which I do need, and I have some jigs in there as well. So stored on the side of my table saw is always my crosscut sled. This is the most common jig that I use. I can slide the fence out of the way, throw this up on my hip, and slot it into the tracks. And I just use this for crosscuts and odds and ends, things that are a little bit small to be using on the regular table saw. I don't have plans for this yet, but it's something that we're working on. I'd really like to share my version of the crosscut sled, so maybe I'll build another one of these in the not too distant future. On the back side over here is everything that I kind of use on my hip. This is the Rockler marking and measuring tool pouch. You guys will know that I always keep this on my hip, and it usually lives up here when I'm not in the shop, and then I'll immediately throw it on my hip along with the safety glasses. And then there's some odds and ends, pencils, angle finder, squares, ear protection, respirator, and then a digital angle finder. These are the things that I grab a whole lot, and then pencil sharpener lives right there. So that's most of the stuff for the table saw. As we come around, you can see I've got my mess sink over here, which is about the best thing that I decided to do late in the build of this shop. I decided to plumb it, and it's been great to have a sink really close by. I just let this area stay messy because there's no preventing it, but I wash out brushes. I have all the different spray paints. I've got like my Total Boat epoxies live up here. I probably should have a fire safe cabinet, but I've always just stored everything in this metal file cabinet. So someday maybe I'll replace it, but for now, this is where all of my finishes, my stains, my glues, and then odds and ends painting supplies are at the bottom. First aid kit is over here, and then I have a whole bunch of tape up here. Usually there's a whiteboard in here, but again, that's in the house. Speaking of whiteboards, I actually did I get this question all the time. This is technically a whiteboard, this whole garage door, but I don't know, it doesn't clean up very well, and I don't find myself using it that often anyway. I recently discovered that there's a whole bunch of people making these accessories for Festool track saw tracks, and these just attach. This one's from FastCap, but I know that there's a bunch of makers out there that are 3D printing these, and you can buy them, and I think they're basically all pretty similar. The thing that I like about this way of storing your track saw track is that there's really very few ways to use a garage door for storage because it does have to go all the way up in the ceiling, and these stay put when you roll them up. I also use this area for breaking down all of my sheet goods, so the track saw track really should live right here. So I have 2 workbenches in this shop, and this is the workbench that I use for breaking down all of my sheet goods. It's where I keep my Festool vacuum, the HEPA-Vac, and I also keep most of my Festool accessories that hook into the vacuum hose. I store all of my sheet goods to my left, so it's pretty easy to grab them, set them down on the table, and break them down. I also have a piece of foam that goes underneath them. So this takes all the impact, and this thing never actually gets cut up. Underneath this workbench, I have all of my Festool gear. So we've got the Domino right here. We have a sander. We have the track saw, and then a couple of sustainers underneath that. I always think that this could be organized a little bit better, but one thing that I do like about it is that I've left this bay open so that if I'm using my track saw, I can slide it from one side to the other, because sometimes I want the hose on that side, sometimes I want it this side, and that's proven to be pretty handy. I've also got clamps, easily accessible, and they also tuck away pretty well. They're lower than the level of the table. They're also sitting on a French cleat, so if they are really getting in the way, especially if I'm milling materials from the table saw, I can just pick them up, move them to a different part of the room, and then when I'm ready to put them back, I just put them back on that French cleat. So on the opposite side of this workbench, I have a bunch of storage of my sanding discs. I have some clamps. These are the Rockler Bandy clamps, and I've got more Festool accessories, things like the bags for the vac, and this is like a sanding pad. I've got my Kreg jig stuff in here as well. A bunch of odds and ends that I do find myself kind of using in this corner of the shop. So that brings us to the second workbench, which I recently upgraded, and this has become the heart of the shop. This is where I probably spend most of the time sort of fiddling and making sure that things are more precise. This one's kind of the rough cut area, and this is the precision area. So I have a bunch of accessories on here, including I've got a plane stop here, so I can raise this up. It's got slots. I had a lot of people comment to me that I should just slot this thing. I had it flipping over in the video, and all I did was cut out the slot so it raises up. So if you are planing a board, you can leave it right up against here and it'll stay put. And then when you don't need it, it lowers down. This also doubles for sanding, especially when you sand picture frames. I like to loop them over the top of something, so I'll lay it on here, and then I can sand in a more ergonomic way right here. And then there's the clamps on the far side of this. So I've got 2 of these Rockler quick action clamps, so they open up super easily, and then the instant you start to screw them, they start to tighten. And these have been amazing, especially when I was working on the kitchen cabinets. I was able to hold the whole cabinet sides and do all of the edge banding right up here. I can't believe how long I lived without having a set of vices on the side of this workbench. So I drilled all these dog holes into the workbench so that I have more work holding options, and it's proven to be super handy. If I just grab a board from up over here, and it doesn't really matter what size, I can find the dog holes that match. I have these dogs that go into these holes, and they've got a flat side on them. So I can center this up, set it in there, set it into the vise, and then tighten it up. And that's incredibly tight. And for wider boards, I might put four bench dogs in. So one thing that I do want to add to this workbench is more storage below for the accessories. That's something that I've been putting off. I do have a couple of storage areas already dedicated in here. I've got some bypass doors that I've added in, which I keep my router and all the router accessories. This is my palm router. We've got a sanding board that just lives behind this cleat. You lift it up, slide it out, and you'll know that I use these a lot for flattening, pieces of patterned plywood. On this face, I've got more bypass door storage, and this is all my Total Boat epoxy accessories, and I think I even have some of the Total Boat Halcyon finishes. They live in here. On this side, I have a couple measuring tools. I have all of my glue accessories. I usually use this table for assembly, so it's nice to have all the different glue accessories easily accessible. Here I've got shop wax from Bumbleshoots. I love this stuff. I put this on all my tools to prevent them from rusting. I also put it on the work tables. I put it on the table saw top. This is just nice to have, easily accessible. Whenever I have somebody in the shop, immediately their eyes go to this. This is my camera setup, and it is probably the best thing I've added to this shop in the last couple of years. This is called a jib. I did a little bit of modification, but this is almost off the shelf jib. I think it's a 4-foot jib. And the nice thing about this, what it's designed for actually is to do some really cool smooth shots from up to down and left, right, do some pans and tilts and stuff. But what I use it for is just quickly setting up a shot, because I'm filming in here by myself, so I can very quickly focus on whatever the subject matter is and get a shot that's really nice and tight, on my hands, for example. And then if I want to do a bigger, more establishing shot, I can quickly grab the jib, rotate it around. I've got a ball head on here, and I can get a much wider shot of the same action. This has just streamlined shooting so much. The whole thing is up on wheels. Because this is a nice flat floor, it makes it nice and easy. It's all counterbalanced to my camera, so it moves around really nice and smooth. And one of the coolest things is that I can put it out over the top of my tables, which you can't do with a tripod. So if I want to do an overhead shot of something that I'm working on, like some patterned plywood, I can flip this straight down, raise it up, rather than getting a C-stand or some other contraption that goes over the top of the table. I can film like this, and my camera has a little flip out monitor, so I can actually see, exactly what I'm doing, hit record, and do whatever it is that I'm doing. I'll post a link to all the stuff that this is made up of. It's kind of cobbled together from a bunch of different parts, but I wouldn't film on anything else. I feel like I've found the perfect rig for filming for me, and I love this thing. Speaking of cameras and filming and accessories, I'm sure if you haven't seen the other video, you'll ask what these are up here. This is my Seamless for photography. This hasn't changed since last time. I do have a video on setting this up, but if I want to take a picture, we sell a bunch of product on the website, if I want to take some product photography, I will lower this down so I can get a nice white background, get it evenly lit, which honestly the lighting in this shop is pretty good. So I can usually just set up, take a picture of sweatshirt or a hat and set it out here. and I get a nice clean backdrop. I have a few different colors. I will say I almost never use the gray. I kind of wish I had gotten black. I feel like this just doesn't look very good. It's nice to have. You can always swap out the rolls. You can cut these off because they're paper. I'm starting to get some wrinkles in here, so it's probably about time to make a new cut in the white so that it's a little bit cleaner of a backdrop. Another thing that's new since the last tour is my office, and I know many of you followed along on that build. This is the space. It is awesome. Obviously, I use this almost as much as I use the shop because I'm always in here editing videos, and I even have a couple tools in here. I have my Glowforge, which is a laser cutter, and this is super handy to have in a nice clean space. It's also plumbed and ducted outside, and the flat file that I built for it helps store all the materials for any sort of cutting that I need. These were our wedding place holders. On the other side, I have the 3D printer. I don't use the 3D printer as much as I wish I did, but it is handy to have for odds and ends. But of course, the main workstation is here, and my plan was to build a desk as part of this build series. This is a sit-stand desk, but basically all I did was I put a sheet of plywood on top of a sit-stand desk, and I'm really happy with it. Eventually, I think I might actually build a nice desk. I sort of have a temporary stand for my computer, and but I've been set up like this for a while, and I really enjoy it. We've been trying to develop these as a product for the website for a little while. It's not quite ready yet, but we have some pattern plywood accessory trays that are modular, and I've been using it at the desk and I really like it a lot. The design's not quite there yet. I'd kind of like for them to sit a little more stably on themselves, but it is a nice little prototype. I built these acoustic panels up top, and then I also added some acoustic foam. And I mean, every video that I've put out for the last year has been recorded in this space. All the voiceover has been recorded in this space, so it sounds really good. It's kind of wild when you walk in here and you can notice the world just kind of hush when you walk in. It's got very little reverb. We actually have the door open, but if you close the door, it gets even quieter. This is Winston's hangout usually. He doesn't love the loud noises, but or a camera in his face. I get a lot of questions about the light in this space because obviously there's no windows, but we have a door right in front, and I've actually built a dog door for Winston so he can hang out and look outside. It's a really nice, tranquil space that I enjoy spending like lots of time in here. So obviously workshops are always evolving, which is the reason why we're doing a shop tour 2 years later. But I will say that I am the happiest I've ever been in this shop. The workflow is working as good as it ever has, and I can't think of too many more improvements that I want to make. I mentioned before that most of the projects, including this workbench and all sorts of things around me, have plans, and they're all up on the website, almfab.com/plans. The other thing that we're launching with this video is sets of plans, which we've never done before, so you can actually buy a discounted set of plans, so all the plans for this entire workshop all in one package if you're interested in that. I really appreciate the support. If you are interested in supporting the channel, you can also check out the affiliate links down below. All the tools that I've mentioned have affiliate links associated with them. And of course, there's the Patreon. I am so appreciative of my Patreon supporters. You guys are the best, and I'll catch you on the next one.